Hi guys, I just wanted to come on here and talk about my birth story with my first son. He will be 2 on May 31st, so it's been almost 2 years, and I've written out his birth story, but I haven't done a video about it, and it was an experience. So, kind of starting at the beginning, we got pregnant, and I kind of always knew that I didn't want to have a hospital birth because my mom had 3 VBACs at home. So she really just kind of inspired me to have home births, and I just never really thought about delivering in a hospital. I've had not great experiences in hospitals, which one of them was when I was pregnant with my son. I felt really belittled by a doctor and laughed at, and I had gone in there because I thought I had a concern, and she just laughed at me and basically told me that I was wrong. So yeah, I basically just knew that I wasn't gonna ever have a hospital birth. So the hurdle came with trying to convince my husband to not let me, but that home birth was okay and that home birth was safe. So I did start seeing an OB at the beginning of my pregnancy and before then, because we did have a little bit of infertility problems getting pregnant with my son. So I was seeing an OB to take fertility medication to get pregnant with him. And I was on 50 milligrams of Clomid from day 3 through 8, I think. And it did work on the first cycle, so that was really exciting. And so I just continued seeing my OB because, again, my husband wasn't very on board with home birth. So we get about to the halfway mark. We get the anatomy scan done with the OB, and everything went well. We had gotten a blood test when I was 10 weeks, 9 weeks, or 10 weeks, and found out that it was a boy. And everything on the anatomy scan, like I said, was good. And so I had convinced my husband that we would go and have a consultation with a midwife that I had found that took our insurance. So that was a really good plus. It was at a birth center called Better Birth. They are no longer around. The owner retired, so she sold the birth centers that she had. And I found that out when I got pregnant with my second son, but that'll be a different video. We went to go and have the consultation, came with a list of questions. My husband came and he had a bunch of questions as well. What would you do in case of emergency? What kind of supplies do you have? And she took us on a tour of the birth center, even though we were going to be delivering at home. She just wanted to show us how prepared and knowledgeable that they actually were, which was great. And he, got convinced right after that consultation. So then we decided to switch, and we switched right around the 20-week point, 19 or 20 weeks. And I'm so glad that we did. It was a really good decision. So I was due May 27th. Again, it's been 2 years. So I was due May 27th, and my mom was flying in May 23rd. So I was hoping to go into labor on May 24th, but that didn't happen. So my mom flew in, and we were doing everything that we could. We were going on walks, eating spicy food, eating pineapple, doing labor smoothies. Nothing was working. Eating dates, evening primrose, nothing was working because because I just wasn't ready. I wasn't even term yet. So my due date comes around May 27th. So May 29th comes, and it's 2 days after my due date, and my mom was only going to be in town for another week and a half. So I really wanted him to come because she's a doula, and I wanted her to be there for my birth and to help me and to meet her grandson and just spend time with us. And yeah, so I really wanted to go into labor. So the 29th comes, and it's Memorial Day that year, and we decided at my appointment that I would ask for a membrane sweep. It's where the midwife, while they're checking you to see how dilated you are, they kind of stretch and run their fingers between the cervix and the amniotic sac to kind of irritate the cervix and help you go into labor if you're pretty much ready. So we did that at noon, 4, and 8 p.m. So we did it 3 times in one day, which I do regret. I regret, getting membrane sweep and basically inducing my home birth labor. It caused my labor to be very, very long, and it was very uncomfortable. It hurt. It was painful, and I just was not happy with it. And if I could go back and change it, I would. But here we are. So we had the last one at 8 p.m. basically is what put me into labor. I had a really strong contraction while she was doing the sweep, and they just kept coming after that and weren't going away. So we went home and bounced on the ball. I bounced on the yoga ball, and we were just, trying to relax and sitting around. I was also trying to pump. I wasn't getting anything because I hadn't had my baby yet, but the stimulation is supposed to help you go into labor as well. So I was pumping and bouncing on the yoga ball, and my contractions were coming pretty consistently. So around 1 a.m. I called the midwife to come over and let her know that I was having a lot of contractions and that they were, within the 5 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute for 1 hour within that rule. So she had come over. She got there probably around 2 a.m. and, I just continued to labor, and my husband was helping with counter pressure. My mom was helping with counter pressure, and I was just waiting for the baby to come. By the end of the sweep and stretch at 8 p.m., I was a 5. So they had gotten me from a 1 to a 5 in, just the 3 sweeps in one day. So I was laboring for a while. 5 a.m. comes, and my contractions kind of stopped. They were getting further and further apart. Me and my husband had come into the bedroom and just laid down on the bed, try and relax, while the midwives and my mom were, and the doula also, I had another doula there too. They all just sat in the living room on the couch and were listening for my sounds that I was having contractions, and they were timing them out there. So it was around 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., and they weren't really hearing me anymore, and I was falling asleep in between contractions, and I was getting more and more sleep in between them. And so they were like, hey, I think that your labor is kind of dying down. It's not doing much, not progressing, so we're going to go ahead and go home. Let us know if any changes happen. So me and my mom and my husband all went to sleep, and around 10:30-ish, I woke up and I was having excruciatingly painful contractions. So my labor had picked back up, and it was just, consistent one after another. So I decided to get in the bath to help relieve them. So I got in the bath and was feeling kind of pushy, but not like I needed to push, but just a little bit of pressure and a little bit pushy. So I told my mom, and she said, you know, just listen to your body and go with it if you feel like you need to push. Just if it becomes more intense, let me know and we'll call the midwife back. A couple of hours go by and I was bouncing on the yoga ball again. My mom had made muffins, so we were eating muffins, and it got to the point where I couldn't talk through my contractions anymore. So I called the midwife again and I let her know that they had picked back up and they were just not, they were more intense and stronger and coming closer together. So she came back over because I had gotten a contraction in the middle of the phone call and I had to hand the phone to my husband. I couldn't talk, I couldn't hold the phone, nothing. So she's like, okay, yeah, it's time. So she came back over. The doula actually got into a little bit of a fender bender on the way over. So she was a little bit late, and the student midwife came back over as well. And I was just laboring, and the doula was helping me with counter pressure. My mom was too, my husband as well. I'll insert some pictures of, I had a photographer as well. So I'll insert some pictures of them helping me out and me in my labor. So we texted my photographer and let her know that I was at 5 centimeters still, but that my midwife had come back over. We were keeping in touch with her, letting her know what was going on. And then I left my phone to charge in my room while we were walking up and down the stairs trying to get me to dilate more. Because at this point I was still a 5. I hadn't dilated, I hadn't changed, and at this point it was probably about 6 p.m. so it had been 22 hours and no change, just laboring and being in pain and miserable. So they had me, we were going to take a walk outside, but then I told them that we had stairs, and so they had me walking up and down the stairs, taking, 2 stairs at a time, so skipping a stair to try and really open up my pelvis and get me to dilate. And then I had said something to my husband, but it was very snarky and very in not a nice tone. So at that point my doula was like, okay, you're in active labor. And I'm like, are you sure it's not transition? I'm miserable, I want to be done. And they had me laboring on the toilet a lot because that's supposed to help open up and dilate, because you're sitting but there's no support on the downstairs area, so it kind of allows it to open. So they had me sitting on the toilet a lot. They had gotten me a pillow. They had me sit backwards on the toilet. They laid the pillow on the tank, and I just kind of laid there and was laboring on the toilet for a really long time. And then I had gone to the stairs, and I got back to the bottom of the stairs. We had gone up and down the stairs a few times, and I had gotten back to the bottom and was just hanging on to my husband and crying because I was in so much pain, and it was just, I felt defeated because it wasn't progressive and nothing was really happening, no change, and my contractions weren't very long. They never quite made it to 1 minute, lasting 1 minute, and I'll tell you why once we get to the birth. But they yeah, they never really got to the full 60 seconds of what they should be when you're in active labor. So while I was hanging on to my husband and going through contraction, I saw my photographer. She had come downstairs and told us that she didn't get a response from us, so she decided to come on down, which thank goodness she did, because we went back upstairs and I got checked and I was at a 6. So this is about 7:30 p.m. So 23 and a half hours after I started laboring, I'm finally making progress and I got to a 6. So that was really exciting and I was just ready for it to be over. So they had been filling up the bathtub, or not the bathtub, sorry, the birthing tub, because I did not want to deal with sterilizing my bathtub before and after and all the cleanup. So we used the birth tub that they had lent to us, and I remember just kind of waiting for it to be warm enough, and it finally was. So I got in and I just kind of, leaned up against the side and was laboring in there, and had my husband pushing on my back to do counter pressure. And then, so then I decided to lean back on the tub and just kind of sit there like this with my legs kind of out and kind of like this, and my doula did counter pressure on my knees, so it kind of brought my legs back into my hips. That was the most relief I have ever felt in my entire life. That was incredible, and every time I had a contraction, I just kept asking for them to push on my knees. My mom, my doula, my husband, everybody. I do remember one contraction I had in the tub, or in the birth pool, was my husband was giving me counter pressure on my back, and my mom and doula I was laying forward, they were kind of at my head, rubbing my head with a wet towel and just kind of talking me through the contractions and making sure that I, had what I needed. And the contraction had ended, so I was like, okay. And they had stopped, my mom and my doula, but my husband had not, and he was keeping that pressure on my back, which was at this point hurting because I was no longer having a contraction. So I kept saying, okay, and he just wouldn't, I don't know if he didn't hear me or if he wasn't understanding why I was saying okay, but then I yelled at him to stop. And he was like, oh, sorry. Just kind of backed off a little bit. And my mom said to him, don't take it personal. He's like, yeah, no, I know, I'm not. So that was a funny moment in my labor that I remember. And another way that I knew I was in transition was I asked for a bowl because I felt like I was going to be sick, and a lot of women get sick during their transition. Thank goodness I didn't. I did not have to use that. So it was around 10 p.m. and I was about 8 centimeters and my water was bulging. So what that means is a little bit of the bag had come out of the cervix and was just, ready to pop. But it was also, when the baby is in water, they're buoyant. So they're not putting pressure on your cervix and they're not really 100% fully engaged. So when she said that I had a bulging bag, she asked if she could break my water, and I was very scared. I did not want it to hurt. I've heard that once your water breaks, the contractions get way more intense. So I asked my mom what I should do, and she of course told me that I should do whatever I wanted to do, but I wanted her to tell me what to do. Because I was scared. I did not know what choice to make. So I did decide to have her break my water because my mom had told me, yes, it's going to be more intense. The actual water breaking is not going to hurt. The contractions will hurt more after that, but then it's going to go a lot quicker. So I decided to have her break my water, which wasn't painful. I didn't really notice it because I was in the water, and so I didn't feel any gush or anything. But the contractions did get more intense, and I labored in the tub for a little while longer, and she checked me again, and I was a 9.5, but I had a cervical lip, which, if you don't know what that is, your cervix starts out like this, where there's like 0 centimeters, and then 1 centimeter is when you can get a finger in there, and then, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, all the way to 10 centimeters. And when you're 10 centimeters, that's when you can push. I was 9.5 with a cervical lip, so a little bit of the cervix was still in the way, just on one part of the cervix. And if you push with a cervical lip, it can cause your cervix to swell, which will not allow you to fully dilate, and it will elongate your labor more until the swelling goes down, and then you'd be 10 centimeters and then you can push. So she asked if she could hold the lip out of the way while I pushed to try and get his head past that, so that it would not cause swelling, and so that he would just be born. And I declined. I did not want her to do that. The contractions were very intense at that point. I did not want any more pain at all. So I said no. So she had me get out of the birthing tub and onto my bed so that I could put basically my face and shoulders on the bed with my butt up in the air, kind of like downward dog, so that I could get him off of my cervix to allow that to open up completely. And so I labored on my bed like that for a little bit, and it just was not comfortable. I did not want to be there anymore. I wanted to move. So she had me go to the birthing stool. She put it at the end of my bed and had me sit on it. It's basically the shape of a toilet, and it's the same concept as laboring on the toilet. It's support so that you can actually sit, but the middle is empty so that there's basically gravity can help you dilate and push and give birth. I later found out that that is not the best way to give birth, and I will let you know why in once we get to the actual birth part. So at this point, I was sitting on the birthing stool and laboring and having contractions, and they were monitoring his heart rate, which was going down. It got down into the 90s, I want to say, which for a baby that is still in the womb is pretty low. It's a little bit of cause for concern. So they put oxygen on me to get his heart rate back up, and she said that she was going to just move the lip out of the way so that I could get him out. At that point, I didn't really know kind of what was going on. I wasn't really registering that anything was wrong. I just kind of tuned everything out and, just put the oxygen on me. Okay, whatever, cool. I didn't ask questions. I didn't get concerned or anything, which is good, because if I had freaked out, that would have not been good. That could have delayed it more. So she had, what they do when they move the lip out of the way, they, kind of just put pressure on the cervix while you push. So she kept telling me, push my fingers out, because that's where I needed to push to get his head out. So I was pushing and pushing, and I finally felt his head move past my pelvic bone, which it was just basically like that. But it was the weirdest feeling in the world, and I cannot describe it, and it didn't really hurt, but it felt pretty cool, and it was one of the most incredible feelings that I've ever felt. So once he was past my cervix, then that was really good. They were turning my oxygen down, and he was doing really well. and they had sent my mom out into the kitchen to get some oil to help lube it up so that it wouldn't tear, basically. And so I was pushing, and right when she came back in the room, I was pushing some more. And they were rubbing the oil so that I wouldn't tear. But I just kind of was pushing with all my might. I wanted to get him out. I did not want to be in labor anymore. I did not want these contractions anymore. I was just done. So, So then at this point, my husband and my mom and I could feel his head. He was right there and ready to come out. Normally, when you are having a natural birth, you slowly push and you listen to your body, and you stop when you need to stop. If you feel burning, if you feel tearing at all, then you stop and rest for a minute, allow some more stretching, and then keep pushing. I didn't. I just pushed with all my might and just wanted to get him out. So one second you could see his head, and the next second he was completely born. Not just his head. And by me saying you could see his head, you could see like the tip of his head. Just like a little bit of, hair, and then all of a sudden he was born. I did not wait. I just pushed his whole body out right in one push. And I pushed for probably 30-40 minutes. So it wasn't anything too long. But then they had me bring him up to my chest, but I had to bring him to my stomach because his cord was super short, which is why my contractions did not get to a full minute, is because he couldn't handle it with the short cord. So I had him on my stomach and I was freaking out, and it was just the most amazing moment ever to just be holding my baby and not be pregnant anymore, really. And it was just so incredible. So then they had moved me onto the floor. They laid me down and checked everything out, made sure everything was good. I had a deep 2nd-degree tear, and that was very painful. I didn't feel myself tear because I was just pushing so fast, but the recovery was atrocious. It was the most pain ever. But he was born at 12:05 a.m. Nope. But he was born at 12:10 a.m. He was 8 pounds, 3 ounces, and 20 inches long. So he was a pretty big baby. But yes, he was born at home with my mom and my husband there. And I am so glad that I got to have my home birth. When I was about 8 centimeters, my midwife asked me if she could administer Pitocin once he was born because she was worried about hemorrhaging, which in my initial paperwork I had declined. I did not want that. I did not want it unless it was absolutely necessary. But I was 8 centimeters and in a lot of pain, so I just agreed to it because I just didn't care at that point. I do regret it. I wish that I wouldn't have gotten it, but it is what it is, and I didn't have any side effects or anything that I know of from it, so that's good. So once they laid me down, then I delivered my placenta, and like I said, I had a deep 2nd-degree tear. So they moved me up onto the bed. I started breastfeeding my son for the first time, which I did have a little difficulty with. So I had my mom help me, and the midwife, the student midwife that was there, was a lactation consultant. So the student midwife that was there was a lactation consultant. So she helped me along with my mom and the midwife. and we got him latched, and he ate really well and for a good period of time. So we were just bonding, and my husband held him as well. When I moved to get up onto the bed, he got him, so he got to do skin to skin with him and hold him and bond with him as well. And they had laid me on the bed to get stitched up. So when you have a home birth, the midwives can do some things and they cannot do other things. They can stitch up a 1st degree and a 2nd degree tear. They cannot stitch up a 3rd degree tear or higher. And since the birth of my second son, I believe that I did have a 3rd degree tear that went unnoticed because of what the OB said with my second son. And I'll get to that in the video of his birth story, so keep an eye out for that. But I had a deep 2nd degree tear, and what they do is they have lidocaine with them, so they draw the lidocaine out in the needle and they administer it down there, which was very, very, very painful. So they administer the lidocaine with the needle, and it was very painful. She had to make multiple pokes to get it fully numb for me to be able to be stitched up properly. And it took her an hour and 10 minutes to stitch me up, which was very excruciating. I was yelling ow the whole time, and I feel really bad for it now, but that's how I was coping with the pain. So the recovery on that was not very fun, but I am very glad that I had my home birth, and I'm very glad that everything went well and that he was born safely. I am not glad that I basically got induced and it took me 23 hours for my body to catch up to being a 5. And because once I was a 5, or once I got to a 6, 5 hours later he was born. So it really would have not taken that long if I hadn't gotten induced. I really think that it would have gone a lot quicker and not less painful, but less time in pain, not 28 hours, because my second son, I was in labor for 4.5 hours. So drastic difference. There were a lot of differences with his labor, so keep an eye out for his birth story, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye.